Here are the first 10 steps of the CDD method that you can apply to help your dog overcome reactivity. For those of you who are not familiar with the CDD method, it's a natural and holistic way of teaching dogs through natural learning and holistic teaching. And this is coming away from cues and commands. It is taking a step away from training, although force-free training can be used alongside it. But we do want to start reducing the amount of cues that we're getting our dogs to rely on and getting our dogs to rely on treats. Now, there are several reasons for this. You can have a look at the reasons for this in my resources. I also have some blog posts on this, and if you're in the group, definitely look at the guide section and the featured section so that you can get a real overview of what the CDD method is and what it means too. So the first step of teaching the CDD method is teaching language. Now, we know that dogs can understand language. There are studies that do support this, and I do have those listed in my course as well. You can actually trial the first few stages of the course, and you can see the list of studies there for free. So you can have a look at that, sign up and have a look, and you can see all the studies that have helped to influence the CDD method. So there are actually 5 stages of dialogue, and I do have the full 5 stages available in my Redefining Reactivity book and my Redefining Reactivity course. But I'm going to touch on a few just so that you've got something to work with, so I can get you started and you can actually start to see the change that the CDD method can offer you and your dog. So the first stage is teaching word association and following that up with narration. Now, we teach word association in the same way that we would teach young children. And the way we do this is we just focus on the word that we want to teach, but we're not going to isolate it. Now, it's very tempting, and we do this a lot with dogs when we're training dogs, is we isolate the word and we just say like door or sit or down, and we give very instructional language. And I'm going to come away from this because we don't want to rely on this instructional language all the time, this kind of cues and commands. Now, it is important to recognize that sometimes we do need to give instructions. We do need to have some control over our dogs in some respect when we want to keep them safe and when they're not able to make a safe decision. But what we want to do is come away from this just a little bit where it's safe to do so. So inside the house, we're going to start with word association, and we're going to just teach this in a sentence, in a simple sentence. So rather than just an isolated word, we're going to use a sentence. The reason being because it provides context, and when we provide context, it helps us to give natural dialogue. Also, we're going to give our natural gestures, and our body language is going to be much more natural rather than just standing still and giving these kind of instructional one-syllable words. So for example, if I want to teach my dog about going out the door and coming back in the door, I'm not just going to go to the door and point and say door, because that doesn't give an awful lot of context to the situation. It's also not giving away a lot in my voice. You can hear that it's a bit more instructional, but there's not a lot of emotion in the voice. Now, emotion matters, so we want to keep it positive and at least neutral. We don't want to, allow stress or anger or anything like that to get into our dialogue with our dogs. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by saying, right, we're going to go through the door, and as I'm opening the door, I'm going to time it, so I'm saying door. So I'm going to go, right then, shall we open the door, as I'm opening the door. So timing the word association is really important. Narration is another thing that follows that. So narrating what you're doing as you're doing it. Even things that you might not think are relevant, like if you're popping out the room, just say, right, I'm coming out the room, I won't be a minute, you can follow me or you can stay here. Just allows your dog to know where you're going, when they can expect you back. This can really help with separation anxiety related issues and things like that. It's something that's a very complex issue, so you will need to work with a professional with that, but it's just something that can help, and it can certainly help prevent separation anxiety, so that we are given the context of what's happening and we're given the reassurance that we are going to be back. So those things are just giving your dogs the choice to come and go, follow or not. And that's just going to help. Just narrate what's happening at the time. Just start within the house and the garden. So you're narrating what's happening, you're narrating the sounds that your dogs are hearing, you're narrating what your dog's seeing, you're narrating what they might be worried about. You're just giving that simple narration in a reassuring tone. When you're teaching word association and you're teaching the narration, it might not seem that you're teaching things that are relevant, but it will become relevant when it all ties together. And I'll build that picture for you in a second. I just want you to begin with the word association and simple narration where you think it might be relevant, and even in terms of where you think it might not be, because it will definitely come in handy. Another part of teaching language is asking your dog questions. When they started to understand the word association, they're understanding the language that you're building for them, you can start to ask them questions and give them very, very simple choices. Now, the reason that we do this is because we want to get your dog used to making a decision. If your dog isn't used to making lots of decisions, it can feel completely overwhelming and they don't know how to make the choice. And actually, sometimes the easier option and the less stressful option is to get us to make the decision for them. So when that happens, we can certainly step in and make those decisions for them when we can see they're not in a state of mind to make a good decision, to make a safe decision, or even to make a decision at all. But asking questions, really simple questions, we're looking for our dog's responses, because dialogue is a two-way thing. It's all very well us teaching them language so they can understand us, but we need to be able to understand them in return so that it's a proper dialogue. So when we ask them questions, we see what their replies are. We can ask them things like, are you hungry? Do you want your breakfast now? Do you want to go for your walk now? So you ask those questions in context of what's happening and see what their replies are. You can ask them questions in any regard. You can say, do you want to play with this toy? Do you want to play with that toy? What snack do you want to have? Do you want to have this snack or that snack? So start to give them very, very simple choices and asking those questions, very simple questions, so you can start to recognize their replies when they're saying yes, no, or I don't know, because that's really important. Now, the second part of this is to give choices, really simple choices. So we just touched on that. So I just want to brush on that a little bit more. So when you're giving choices, we're giving deliberate choices. They're intentional choices. So we want to make sure that those choices are good choices. We don't want to go, here's a bad choice and here's a good choice. Which one do you want? We want to make sure that we're giving choices. Here's a safe choice and here's another safe choice. So they understand how to make a safe choice. They feel confident in making choices. Because if we set them up to get it wrong and we build them up and we give them a choice, you can either get this choice right or wrong, and they get it wrong, their confidence in making a choice is going to dwindle. So they're going to start feeling unconfident in themselves and not so sure of themselves and not so sure of their ability to make those choices. So make sure that we give them safe choices. Here's a choice between one safe thing and another safe thing. Now, choices can either be between items, it can be between different directions on a walk, it can be between what they want to do, an activity, it can be between what they want to eat, it could be loads of different things. But make sure you just start with 2 choices, and then as they start to feel confident making more choices, you can build that into 3 or 4 different choices that they can choose from. And don't be afraid to step in. So if your dog's feeling overwhelmed and you can see they're not coping with this choice and they're just starting to get frazzled by it, we'll make that choice for them. It's okay to do that to start with, but we need to also recognize when it's time to stay back, when it's time to allow them to think and to process what's happening. And this can take a little bit of time. So when your dog's thinking and contemplating a choice, just don't rush them. So let them just think it through, give them a couple of minutes. It can take a little bit of time, especially if they're not sure. If you can see that they're completely ignoring the choice or that they are feeling overwhelmed, then we'll make the choice for them. Or it might be, if they're actually not responding to the choice, that could be a response depending on your dog. So it could be that they're opting out and saying, no thanks. So the third step is understanding a dog's body language. Now, it's really common to see the body language charts and all the little demonstrations of ears back means this and tail down means this and a wagging tail is great. But that's very one-dimensional, and that is useful and it is relevant to certain aspects of dog body language. But when it comes to individual dogs, they all have slightly different nuances with their body language. So one dog, when they're happy, they might put their ears up and their tail might wag to the side. Now, for another dog, that actually might mean they're anxious. So a wagging tail alone doesn't mean a happy dog. The ears going back alone doesn't mean an unhappy dog. It very much depends on the context of the situation and your dog's individual body language. So look at what's going on around them. Look at the body language. When the ears go back, does the tail tuck down as well? Are they making themselves quite small and closed? That does indicate that they're not happy. when they're wagging their tail, are they wagging their entire body? Are they really wiggly? Are their ears forward? Are they more open in their body language? And I look at it as like open body language and closed body language, because that helps to determine that there are all these other little things that go on that show open and closed. So closed is very small, it's a bit more kind of slow paced, it's a bit kind of reserved, and open is very much more forward, they're leaning forward, their ears are forward, but they're relaxed. Because forward, when they're forward and they're stiff and their muscles are very tense, that obviously isn't very positive either. So looking at your dog's body language as an individual and seeing what they are saying at the time, which is why asking questions helps, because you can start to recognize your dog as an individual and their individual replies. The fourth step is understanding a dog's personality, but also understanding their breed traits too. Understanding a dog's personality really begins by recognizing that each and every dog has a very unique personality. They're not all just determined by their breed traits. They're not all the same because they're a dog. There are many, many different things that build up your dog's personality. So we need to understand who your dog is, because when we understand who they are and we understand their personality traits, we can suggest things that will complement their personality rather than rub up against it in the wrong way. And that makes a huge difference. For example, if you've got a very social dog and, you know, even if they are struggling with reactivity, they can still be quite a social dog. They just don't know how to express it right. Now, we wouldn't want to then completely avoid all dogs and never allow them to socialize. We need to teach them how to socialize appropriately. So taking away the social aspect to a social dog is going to become quite boring, frustrating, and it enhances reactivity in many, many cases. On the opposite end of the scale, if you've got a dog that actually isn't particularly social and they don't want to socialize, and we're trying to put them into very social situations, that's going to enhance reactivity too, because now they're in a situation they can't control. So it very much depends. And as you go through this journey, you'll start to learn who your dog is. Are they a social dog? Are they a bit of a mixed bag? Or are they pretty much, I really don't want to socialize with other dogs, or I don't want to be touched by people? And you'll start to recognize who they are and what their preferences are. And they'll start to know that about themselves too, because it's a journey for them about learning their dislikes, their likes, what they can tolerate, what they don't want to tolerate, what they actually want to involve themselves in. They'll start to learn that they get a say in those things as well when it's given to them in a safe way. And recognizing breed traits is really important, because we want to make sure that we're not trying to make a dog that is bred to do something not the thing they're bred to do. Now, that doesn't mean that if you've got a dog that, let's say, is more prone to reactivity because of their breed traits, it doesn't mean that they are always going to be reactive and we just need to give up. But it does mean we need to recognize, like, for example, breeds that are bred to guard are going to be a little bit more on the reactive scale, and they're bred to guard the house. But that doesn't mean that we go, okay, well, we can't do anything about it, that's just who they are, accept it. Neither does it mean that we prevent them from being who they are and go, they're not a guard dog anymore because we've stopped them being a guard dog. We have to respect genetics, we have to respect the breed traits. So we really do need to have that balance between allowing our dogs to do the breed traits that they're bred to do, but in a very safe and controlled way. So providing safe outlets where it's no longer becoming a problem for them and it's no longer becoming a problem for you. Number 5 is actually reducing the amount of training, reducing the amount of cues that we give in our dogs, and actually just taking a step back from that control. Now, even when we're using positive reinforcement, we can still do this in a controlling way. So we do need to be aware of that. We need to make sure that we are providing our dogs free choice where it's safe to do so, and not just training them to do something for the sake of it. So for example, having the kind of control like teaching our dogs that they need to sit before they eat, or they need to lie down before they can go outside. Just having a look and going, do they need to do that? Why do they need to do that? And is there another way we can actually, you know, give them that choice where they're still safe? Like, for example, if you want them to be polite around their mealtime, they don't necessarily have to sit. It doesn't need to be as rigid as that. We just need to teach them a little bit of proper impulse control and proper self-restraint where they get the choice to do it. If we keep telling our dogs what to do, when to do it, and how long to do it for, they're never going to think for themselves, because we're teaching them what to do rather than helping them think. So they're just acting. So when we follow through this kind of cued responses, and we are very reliant on that, all we're doing is we're just teaching them to go through the motions. And this is why using treats doesn't tend to actually change the dog's perspective. It doesn't change how they feel for most cases. So working with the dog's mind is what helps them to feel differently about their triggers. So when it comes to using cues, commands, treats, rewards, all that kind of stuff, we can use it, but only when necessary. We just learn when we need to step in with that and when we can teach them through dialogue. So you start to reduce it. And now some people that go through the CDD method find that actually they completely remove it and they no longer need it. But it's not like you're not allowed to use it, that's it. You know, you've got to go through the journey, see what works for you and your dog. Some people might find a kind of even kill with 50% training and 50% CDD. So it's just going through what works for you and what works for your dog best, because it's a very unique experience. And number 6 is replacing that with guidance. So learning how to guide using dialogue, using our narration, using the knowledge that we have for our dogs and knowing who they are, what they're capable of, and knowing when to step in. So learning that guidance of how to guide them, where they're feeling a little bit anxious, perhaps before they see a trigger, then we know what to say at the right time. We know how to kind of redirect them. We know what to say, how to make them feel better, redirect their emotions, how to take them out of the emotional state of their mind and put them back into their intellectual part of their brain, where they can actually think and think clearly too, where they're actually able to make decisions. Number 7 is actually getting involved in your dog's world. So rather than just we tell them what to do, we're getting involved in what they're doing outside, where we're really involving ourselves in their world, in their perspective. So when they're out on a walk and they're finding something amazing to sniff, we can provide that dialogue. What have you found? That's great. Have you got something really nice to sniff? You know, if they're going to go for a swim and they're really enjoying it. Okay, you enjoying your swim? What's over around that corner? You know, or when you're going on a walk, shall we go and see what's up that hill? So you're keeping your dog's focus on the environment rather than where's the next trigger. So actually getting involved in their world and in their perspective can really help. Now this can be in-house as well. If they want to get involved with something you're doing, an activity you're doing, get them involved if they want to. And actually that builds a relationship, it builds the trust, it builds up the fun, and that really helps that dialogue to develop naturally. So number 8 is recognizing their emotions and then understanding how we can guide their emotions, bring them back down to an emotional state where they can actually think and actually help them shift their emotional state. Now this one's a little bit more tricky if you're not used to understanding your dog's emotions, so this is something that will come naturally in time as you go through the CDD method. But this is understanding when our dogs are fearful, or when they're about to enter a fear stage, when they're about to enter into anxiety, or when they are in anxiety, when they're going into over arousal. So recognizing all of those signs from your dog and understanding the dialogue that will help them, because we want to acknowledge that they have these emotions. We don't want to keep them stuck in those emotions. So if they're starting to get really worked up about something, we're not going to carry on talking about the thing that's working them up. So for example, we're on a walk with our dog, we're giving the dialogue, we're talking about everything else that's going on around them, and we know that there's a dog coming. Let's just, for example, say that your dog has not spotted this trigger. So I'm going to just use another dog as this trigger for this particular imaginary dog that I'm talking about. So I'm going to say, oh, there is another dog coming. Are you going to be okay? Why don't we carry on this way, or do you want to go back? What do you want to do? Now this is kind of going further into the stage of dialogue. This is going further into the journey. At first, when your dog sees a trigger, they may just lose their mind completely, and then you're not able to give them those choices. But as you start to get better at this and they start to get more used to the CDD method, you can start to apply those choices. You can say, right, there is a dog over there. Do you want to carry on? Do you want to go backwards? Shall we turn around, go this way? Shall we go up by the pond? You know, so you can incorporate all the dialogue that you've built in with your dog. So that's why teaching dialogue is really important, because it's building in that natural dialogue that you can then talk to your dog about for future events. Now, when your dog is going up in their emotions and they're starting to lose it, then we're going to go, right then, come on, let's go back. Come on, we can go back and see what's in the pond and have a sniff around there. You might see those swans you like to watch. You know, it can be anything that your dog enjoys, but you're preventing them from actually entering into a reactive state. And This isn't always going to happen at first. You're going to learn this, trial and error. And it's also about learning that when your dog does react, it's not the end of the world. It does not mean that you're failing. It does not mean that you're taking a step back. It's part of the process. So when we recognize their emotions and we address them, so we go, okay, all right, you're feeling playful, let's play then. Or okay, you're just getting a bit overexcited, shall we just calm that down a little bit? And when we're talking them through these things, we're also demonstrating with our voice. So obviously if I'm asking for calmness, I'm going to speak in a more calm way. So I'm slowing down my language, I'm slowing down what I'm saying. So I'm demonstrating that through my language, through my body language, of how to demonstrate that calmness, because how we project our voice, how we project our body language directly influences our dogs. So number 9 is using natural distractions. Now, using natural distractions is if we need to distract our dog from something, and we don't want to rely on treats all the time, then we're going to use what's around us. So we might say something like, oh, let's go back over this way. I've seen that there's something over here you might want to look at. Now, that you can use examples for anything. If a dog likes to look at squirrels, use squirrels. If they find squirrels too overstimulating, don't use squirrels. It's just using something that your dog enjoys, where you can shift their focus from one thing to another without constantly using the food treats or a reward or a toy. Now, if your dog is in a sticky situation and you're like, oh my gosh, I just need a quick response, then do use the treats, do use the rewards, but you just want to make sure that that's not your only distraction, that you're using a much more diverse variety, so that you're not just getting into this conditioned response. There's something you don't like, here, come over here and let's do something else, you'll get something nice. Because as we know, that doesn't actually make the connection we think it does. It's just teaching the dog how to go through the physical motions rather than the emotional motions. So number 10, our final step, is actually getting in front of the behavior. So being in front of the behavior, knowing what's going to happen before it happens. Now, we're not psychic, so that's not always going to happen, but we can start to predict. We can start to infer what our dogs are feeling and how they might respond to something. And if we're in front of that behavior, we can then prepare ourselves in what we're going to say, what's around us, how we're going to respond to that. And this just means that we can explain what's happening at the time while it's happening. And again, going back to our first step with building dialogue and teaching language, this is going to really, really help. So when you incorporate all of that, you can start to say, as my example earlier, there is something you're not going to like coming. How are you going to feel about this? And you can gauge it with your dog. Now, this prevents something from happening that I think we're very, very accustomed to doing. And I've experienced this before with my own dog when we were struggling with reactivity, where I would just spot the trigger and I'd go, oh no, let's just go the other way. And I wouldn't even allow my dog to know that there was a trigger around. In fact, my entire goal was to stop my dog knowing there was a trigger around, because I didn't want that response, I didn't want that reaction, and I wanted to keep my dog under threshold. But all this is doing is completely avoiding any opportunity that we have to work with the trigger at our dog's pace. I'm not allowing my dog to have the opportunity to see what he wants to do. And I do think that this is something we all struggle with when it comes to reactivity, because we find it very stressful as well, and we have our own emotions, we have our own lives full of difficulties, so sometimes we just don't want to go there. And you know what, sometimes that's fine, but we want to make sure that where we can, where we're feeling able and we think our dogs might be feeling able, then we're going to just notify them, there is something coming, there is a trigger coming, what do you want to do about it? So this is going to be further on in your journey. You might find that this is going to be too much right at the start, before you've taught your dog emotional regulation and all the dialogue that's needed to go with that. So you might find that avoidance is fine to start with, but just start to notify them. Like, there's a person coming, they're walking their dog, are you going to be okay with that? If your dog's like, oh, not sure, oh okay, let's go back then, come on, don't worry about that, we're going to go over this way, let's see what we can find around this corner. And then change the dialogue to whatever is going on around that corner, away from the trigger. Once your dog is further along in their CDD journey, you might find that they might go, oh, I'm a little bit curious about the trigger, actually I might want to just observe from over here. And that's okay, we'll allow that to happen. But what we're going to be really mindful of is that your dog isn't shutting down. So when they're observing, they should still be quite alert, they should be interested, they should be focused, they should be able to listen to you as well and hear your guidance. But we don't want to see them completely shut down, where they're now like, I can't focus, or they're completely hyper focused on the trigger and now they're really stiff and they can't move, because they can start feeling stuck. So we want to make sure that we're not putting them in that position, but we are allowing them to observe if they want to. Now, observation does happen better when your dog is just moving on the spot. So they're just walking around, watching. They've got the decision to come away when they want to. They've got the decision to go closer if they want to. And if they're getting closer and they're getting a bit too over aroused, or you can start to feel they might be feeling a bit defensive or a bit more reactive, then we'll quickly change direction. We're not going to allow them to have that choice, because that choice isn't actually a proper informed choice at the time, because your dog's now flooded with emotions, and when they're flooded with those kind of emotions, their instincts will kick in, and that's no longer an informed intellectual choice. And another part of this is explaining what's happening so they know what to expect. Now, quite a large part of reactivity is the unknown. When there's something that we're not sure about, it's unknown, we tend to think the worst. So I had a really bad experience at a dentist, and I ended up really fearful of the dentist. I went into the dentist and I thought it was just a checkup, and I ended up having a wisdom tooth removed without any prior notice that this was going to happen. And I was terrified to go back to the dentist, to the point where I wouldn't go to checkups anymore, because in my head, they might take out another tooth, they might do something awful without prior notice. So when I finally had to go to the dentist, and I left it to the point where I needed to go, I explained to the dentist what had happened. I actually found a dentist that was willing to work with me, and I said to them, I'm really nervous. I'm going to shake like a leaf when I come in, and I'm going to be really awful and I'm not going to be the best patient. And the dentist said to me, the best way of working with this is for me to just explain to you what's happening. You tell me when you've had enough, when it's too much for you. You've got the choice. You've got the choice to leave when you want to leave, to say no to a procedure if you don't want it done. And we went with that. So I went in, and he explained to me all the tools. He showed me all the tools he was going to use. He demonstrated the sound that the tools were going to make. And that really helped, because I was actually informed about what to expect. It wasn't going to surprise me, and I wasn't going to think the worst case scenario, because I already knew what was going to happen. And it took a few sessions, and now I'm okay with going to the dentist. And as long as I'm with one that I trust, because I need to know they're not going to just rip a tooth out. But what this is demonstrating, what I'm trying to get across, is that when we teach our dogs that this is going to happen, this is what you can expect, they can instantly start to relax, because they then know that they're not going to think the worst case scenario. They can trust that what we're saying is true, because we've built the trust. We've built the trust through dialogue and respect, and mutual respect as well, to not put them in situations that they're not ready for. We're giving them the choice to opt out if they need to, and we're not going to push them or lure them into a situation that they're not ready for. When they've got that choice, when we teach them there is something coming, you can either walk forwards, we can go past, we can go off this way, we can observe from the distance, or we can completely forget about it. Then they're going to feel much more empowered to be able to make choices and to actually feel more comfortable around that trigger. And they're going to learn that that trigger is not the worst thing in the world, because what they're doing is they're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going to happen. That dog might attack me for no reason. That person might come over and punch me. You know, it depends on the experiences that your dog's had, but also it's not always dependent on the experiences your dog's had. If your dog is genetically predisposed to being a bit more wary and being a bit more suspicious of new people, new things, new situations, they might actually create a worst case scenario in their head anyway. So we need to understand that that can happen, and often it does. But we also need to understand that if we give them that information prior to it happening, we're teaching our dogs that these are reliable situations, you're in control. There's nothing wrong with coming away from that situation, but there's also nothing wrong if you want to explore that situation. And what this is doing is removing the pressure. So we're removing the pressure to achieve a specific thing. And when we remove that pressure, like you must walk past this dog and you get something, or you must do this, sit or lie down or perform a particular behaviour and you get this. When we put that pressure on our dogs, they're trying to get it right, and they don't want to get it wrong. Even if they're not punished for getting it wrong in a physical sense or a verbal sense, the withdrawal of the food that they're conditioned to want is actually a punishment in itself. So they still don't want to get it wrong. So when we remove the right and the wrong and we replace it with safe and unsafe, that's much more dog centric. So we're just taking that pressure away, so they're no longer feeling that pressure of achieving, and doing something right, now they can actually think properly. And we know that some people can actually work under pressure really well, but a lot of people don't. So it is very individual. But for those of you who don't work under pressure, when you remove that pressure, how much better do you feel, and how much more able are you to achieve the thing you actually wanted to achieve in the first place? So this is what we're really driving with our dogs. We're taking away that pressure, we're putting them at the forefront, and we're actually saying, you know what, you're in control of the situation. Because when we remove control from someone, they feel much more out of control. When we give them control back, they start to understand how to feel more in control and how to feel more empowered. That doesn't mean give them all control in all situations and let them just free rein and do what they want whenever they want, because that would be carnage. So we're not doing that, but we're giving them control in a very safe way. And we're giving them control with guidance and teaching them how to use that control effectively. So those are my top 10 steps in getting started with the canine dialogue dynamics. And this is why I do what I do. I just want to make sure that I'm setting you up right, just to get you started before you choose to commit to anything else. If you do this and you do want to commit to something else, I definitely do recommend starting the Reactivity course. This is self-paced with loads and loads of videos of me guiding you and teaching you how to apply all of this in specific situations. I've also got videos of me demonstrating this with my own dogs, and we've got a student group where you can ask questions and reach out to me. I have got a Redefining Reactivity book, which you can either read on its own or pair it with the course. Now, if you're very new to this and you're really committed and you're like, I really want to do this, then I would definitely recommend doing the Redefining Reactivity course with the book and pair those together. And then with those two things together, you can work with me, ask me questions in the group. If you prefer to work with me one-to-one, I do work virtually, and we do one-to-one sessions. So I ask you loads and loads of questions during the consultation, and then I give you feedback on all the things that you can do to just get you started. So we can do those. I've got my behaviour programs there on my website. And if you do happen to live in the Surrey area, I do work in person as well around the local areas of Surrey in the UK. But I do work worldwide online through one-to-one sessions and my courses. If you do have anything that you need, any questions, please do reach out, comment below. If there's any specific questions that you want me to answer, I'm more than happy to do that. So thank you for watching and getting through all of this. I just want to really encourage you to just make those first few steps and just see, trust the process, trust yourself that you are able to do this. Once you understand it and you understand that shift and you change your perspective, you're then able to change your dog's perspective. And it is easy to apply once you come out of that perspective change, because shifting from a belief system that we were told and then realizing that it wasn't true and relearning stuff is hard, and it can take a little bit of time. So give yourself that time. Don't rush yourself into throwing yourself into a method that you're not sure about. I want you to be sure before committing. So please do ask me any questions. I'm more than happy to help you on your journey, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you and hearing the success stories with you and your dog.